Sorry, apparently I was still on mute. So, welcome to another episode of Deathology Presents. Hopefully, everyone can hear me now. Yes, awesome. And my beautiful daughter, Leah. We have my mother in the background, Donna Cobbins, running everything, and I am your speaker for tonight, Shante. So I pray that you enjoy what we have for you tonight. So tonight we're going to be talking about mainstream schools versus deaf schools. And the reason why we want to touch on this topic of mainstream schools versus deaf schools is because there is a different format and a different way on how your child that is deaf or hard of hearing will be educated. And you need to be informed how your child will be educated in a mainstream school with a diagnosis of deaf or hard of hearing versus a deaf school. Okay? Awesome. Alrighty, so it says, what is a mainstream school? So basically, a mainstream school is any of your public schools, any of your private schools, any of your charter schools. That is considered a mainstream school. It is not governmentally based or state based. So that would be your mainstream school. Very simple. I have additional information here. So I'll just read it real quick. It says a mainstream allows your child to attend classes within the local school system. So like whatever your school district is, that's where your child can go to school at. So whether it's a private school or parochial or a charter, Montessori, those are mainstream schools. Okay. So, and I'll get into, I'm just breaking them down. So mainstream programs, the benefits and the downside. So the benefits of a mainstream school is the opportunity to meet and interact with hearing peers. I guess that's a positive. The downside to that is mainstream students can be singled out, and this is true. So normally when you're in a mainstream school, especially if you have children, or not children, sorry, if you have a school that has 700 to 800 people in it, the deaf kids, most children are not aware of deaf kids. They run into them, they bump into them. They just are very unaware of their presence, basically. So that can be a hindrance for them. Hi, Mike. Thank you for joining. Another benefit is exposure to regular curriculum. As you can see, I have it highlighted and I added to it. Deaf schools have regular curriculums too. And I put an arrow to the downside. So we just think that deaf schools don't teach the same thing, the same basis, the same principle as hearing school or mainstream school. And this is not the case. They have the same curriculum. Sometimes in some deaf schools, they have a better curriculum than some mainstream schools. Sometimes the way it's taught is a lot different, but they both have a regular curriculum. So there's really the downside to this is your child may be the only deaf student in the school. Yes, this is the case most of the time. So your child does not have a chance to interact with someone like them or to be able to have exposure to their culture or to peers that are just like them. Most of the time, if hearing kids know someone is deaf, some deaf kids can get bullied by hearing kids. It just depends on the upbringing, especially if hearing kids don't understand the whole concept of them being deaf and their identity. Access to wider varieties of extracurriculum. You see that is highlighted, and I added extra again. Deaf schools have extracurriculum activities. They have clubs, just like hearing schools or mainstream schools. They have sports, just like hearing and mainstream schools. So we definitely want to stop saying that there's a difference and there's not. The downsides is class sizes in some schools can be larger, and the student can get lost, and this is true. So, for example, in a deaf school, the class may be no more than 10 students, less than 5 or 6 students. In a mainstream school, class sizes are 28 and better. If you're in a, if you're in a seminar class, you can have up to 100 students in class. So, alrighty, more practice listening and speaking to communicate. I forgot to put my arrow to the downside. So a lot of people, are educational officials, those that are over the education system, those are in the DHH program. You have some that believe that, all kids should speak. Everyone speaks, they just use a different language or a different way of speaking. So we need to remember that. So what they have tried to do in the past, like Alexander Graham Bell did, was introduce oralism to force a deaf person to stop using their natural way of talking, which is sign, and using their voice, robbing them from their identity and who they are. So the downside would be the school may be ill prepared to meet all your children's needs. And this is true. Some schools don't like to use sign language. You'll have some DHH teachers that feel that sign language is not useful. It's not a tool. That's just like saying Spanish, French, German is not useful. You'll have where parents' voices are not being heard, they're not being met. You'll have where kids don't have access to certain equipment, such as the FMO system, an interpreter, sign language classes to teach them sign language, even their deaf culture classes, so that they understand their culture. Mike said, me and my daughter just had our first hearing aid fitting. Congratulations, Mike. That is exciting. We celebrate all that get cochlears, hearing aids. It's amazing. So I hope that the hearing aids, that when you got the diagnosis of your child losing the hearing, that you didn't take it like, oh my God, that you did your research to figure out what you wanted to do and how to approach things, because what you do for your child here on out will affect your child in the long run. You want more information, you like to talk one-on-one, please inbox me, or you can email me at the email address that is scrolling at the bottom. I hope that this information that you're getting is beneficial and helpful. Please go back and look at some of our other replays that we've done. They should be very informative for you. So we're so glad that you have joined us tonight. All right. Students are held to state and federal standards. Again, I've highlighted this because deaf students are held to state and federal standards too. They have a regular curriculum. Mainstream schools strip deaf culture from students, deaf students, and this is true. They do. There is no place where mainstream, where deaf culture is being taught in a mainstream. I've heard a lot of excuses to why it's not. It's just like saying, we don't want to learn about the American culture. Awesome. Nice to meet you. It's like saying that we don't want to know about deaf history, American history, or we don't want to know about the Jewish history. Or if someone that is African American, we don't want them to know about their history. The Hispanic Americans, we don't want them to know about their history and so forth. Why are we killing the deaf history and the deaf culture? Because it's rich. It is amazing. So another downside to this is mainstream schools will try to deny your students' rights to have access to their language, schools, and culture. And this is true. This is so true. Okay. Awesome. Definitely inbox so we can touch base. But yes, they try to, oh, I'm sorry, I have to wait for. No, you did it in private chat. You need to click over to comments. Oh. Oh. Okay, so my interpreter, her hearing aids are dead, so we need to wait a minute. Let me grab some batteries. Oh, okay. So we're gonna wait so she can switch out her batteries. Sorry. You want to show your aids? I'm fine. Okay. So where we left off was, thank you for waiting.
How bad is her hearing? Very, very, very bad.
So without her hearing aids, you ready? Mm-hmm. Without Leah's hearing aids, she is profoundly deaf. With her hearing aids, they didn't test her with her hearing aids this time, so we do not know how much she truly can hear. They didn't tweak it. Leah had an issue with the audiologist, and she didn't like the audiologist. She thought that her audiologist did not care for deaf or hard of hearing individuals. So hopefully that answers your question. All right, so last one, mainstream schools will try to deny your student of their rights. Make sure you understand what your rights are as what your child's rights are as a hard of hearing and deaf individual. They will try to deny them from their language in school and also culture. We need to make sure that the deaf culture, the sign language culture, does not die, that it doesn't fade away like other cultures have. So what is a deaf, or you may hear residential school? So a deaf or residential school is basically a school that pretty much the whole campus is deaf. You do have some kids that are called day students. They come in and out of, they leave the campus. So they come there in the morning when school is done, they leave the campus. You do have, like my daughter, who's a dorm student, she actually, because she lives further away, she actually stays on campus the whole week, and she gets more exposure to the deaf culture on campus. So it's basically just what it is. It is a campus that is for deaf students, deaf, hard of hearing students. Years ago, many, many moons ago, they used to call them a deaf asylums. And they're not that, or institutions. They are not that either. And I think that's why a lot of people have the reluctance of sending their child to a deaf school, because they hear the word institution and they're definitely not an institution. They are amazing. The schools are a lot, the classes are a lot intimate. You don't have to have that third person in there with the conversation. So it is a lot better, a lot less stress off of the students. So the residential program benefits. As you can see, there's really no downside for a deaf person or hard of hearing. So living within a deaf community provides students the ability to become familiar with and feel a part of the deaf community. This is very important. The more exposure your child gets, the better your child will feel. The better they'll get to understand who they are as a deaf or hard of hearing individual. We are both hearing a big difference with awesome. Hearing aids make the world a difference. Another benefit is classes are taught in American Sign Language, so students can communicate directly with each other. So, and that's the big thing. So in a mainstream school, you have to have an interpreter or an FMO system. Deaf school, you don't need that. The student sign, the teacher sign. There's nothing interfering with the learning process. Another point is curriculums can include material specific to the deaf community, such as deaf folklores. So they tell different deaf folklores, they have deaf culture classes, history classes. They teach if a child needs help with ASL or signing, there is a class for that. So there are different classes that are just geared to deaf culture, but you also get the regular state and federal curriculum. Okay. There is a greater opportunity for socialization because of various of school activities. Can't spell. Sorry. I should read stuff before I do that. But there are a wide range of activities. They have volleyball and basketball and softball and baseball and track, wrestling. Some schools have lacrosse. Some schools have soccer. They have cheerleading. Some schools have tennis. Some schools have a swim team. It just depends on the school. And deaf children have adult deaf role models. This is so important to have a deaf adult role model. Why? Because they can teach your child how to live in the hearing world. they set the example and your child picks up on the example. So for me, for instance, I am hearing. I'm not deaf. I'm not hard of hearing. I'm hearing. I can't teach my two children what it's like to go without hearing, or to navigate the deaf culture, or to navigate the different aspects of hearing culture as a deaf person. So it is very, very, very important. So how do deaf students learn? So deaf and hearing children will learn sign language naturally. So this was a study that was done. They studied deaf children, they studied hearing children, and they noticed that when they teach a hearing child at a young age, and I'll get through all the research, that they learn it very naturally. So it's not a struggle for a child to understand sign language. It's just not. They learn it just the same way as a hearing child learns how to talk. If they're exposed to the signs, they'll pick it up just as fast as when a child is exposed to hearing. So research. So this is a bunch of information about different research studies that was done. So research on children learning sign language began in 1970. It basically goes on to what I just talked about, as far as they knew when they were teaching young children that were hearing how to sign, they would babble with their hands. They would sign babble with their hands. So, which they thought was very interesting. And then it talks about being a coda, that a lot of people would think, well, if their parents are deaf and the child is hearing, that's a struggle, but it really isn't. It's actually, the research has shown that it has increased the vocabulary word in both. So deaf education. So let me put a pause real quick and run over some research that I found. And these research, I'm not going to go through all of them, but these research, you can find them on, if I can read it, the National NSF, National Sign Federation. So it looks like, if you can see it, it looks like this. You can print it out. I can send you, because I've downloaded them, but it gives you all the research. So this research was done in July 2010, and it talks about finger spelling and reading. And it talks about some of the key importance of finger spelling and reading. So for one, deaf families finger spell to their deaf children when they are very young. The earlier the exposure of finger spelling helps these children become better readers. So the earlier a child learns how to finger spell, the better reader the child will become. Huh? I'm going off of the research. I got it from Gallaudet. Finger spelling and reading and writing are interrelated. Finger spelling facilitates English vocabulary growth and a large lexicon. That's Lexicon. And the faster the new vocabulary is learned. So there are 10 research. I think the one that I really wanted to actually hit on real quick was let's see. So they have 2, which is the research study 7. That is the benefits of bilingualism. So the learning of 2 languages. And then research number 8, ASL in English, bilingual education. And a couple of points I wanted to point out was that bilingual teachers base their selection of bilingual practice and strategies on students' linguistic skills, as well as the contents at hand. So they base what kind of skills they have, their skill sets, and that's how they really based their language skills. Sorry, I need to look up so I can read the comments. It is common for parents to find out about their hearing loss after a child gets tested. Yes, it is very common. So with Leah, every kid gets the newborn screening for hearing loss. And with Leah, she passed hers. And then we found out when she was 3 years old that she was losing her hearing. So you really don't know unless there's something drastic that really focuses your attention. So, or if there is a hereditary or genetic loss in the family. So for my 2 kids, their father is hard of hearing, and he carries the gene, the connexin 26 gene. So that causes deafness. So we do know eventually that both of them will be deaf. My son heard longer than his sister, and his kicked in when he hit puberty, but he had other signs such as auditory processing and intermittent hearing loss. So yes, you're correct. A lot of kids get diagnosed after, which is sad. It's not caught earlier. And then developing in 2 languages requires deliberate and careful planning for the use of 2 languages. So basically, you need a bilingual teacher. So if your child is being mainstream and that teacher does not have a degree in teaching a deaf student or a deaf child, they have no clue. They don't know the etiquettes. They don't know what they need to be saying, how they need to tweak it, how to approach the ins and outs. Then you're doing your child a disservice. And so is that teacher. Okay, so we're going to go on to the next one. It says, why do we need deaf education? So deaf education is a board of diverse professional field that centers on the education of children who are deaf or hard of hearing. Teachers often concentrate their studies in early child education, elementary education, or secondary content areas. Teachers of students who are deaf or hard of hearing become experts in language acquaintance and the unique learning and communication needs of their students. Claire failed a school hearing test. Audiologists wonder if my hearing was bad, so did a hearing test for me as well. Okay. And that's good because they want to know if something is going on, if it's hereditary, especially when she gets older or if you have more children, or she gets married and have more children. That's something that you really, want to think about and figure out genetically, maybe get genetic testing to see if it's somewhere in the bloodline. So, all right. This talks about, I'm going to skip through. There are many other areas in which deaf educators expand their careers through advanced study and additional degrees to special education, early intervention, speech language pathology, career technology, audiology, school counseling, social work, education. Deaf education provides a great foundation and career opportunities for individuals who are interested in working in a unique population of students. So basically, when you are a deaf educator, you need to have something else besides just the regular reading, writing, arithmetics, the concentrations on math and arts and sciences and music. You have to have that concrete deaf education, deaf history, deaf culture, American Sign Language, finger spelling class, the logics of ASL, the different types of sign language, because ASL is only used here and it's only used in Canada. So when you go over to Britain, they have BSL. If you go into France, they have FSL. F what?
So wrong.
What?
You're so wrong.
Correct.
It's F something on the other. I have to look at it again. But it's not FSL.
Well, I guess it's changed. When I went to school, it was always been FSL. So I guess it's changed. We'll put it up there. So sign language is constantly changing. The label of sign language is always changing. We both have them fitted the same day after waiting for the ear molds. Cool. I hope she has cool ear molds. My son has some really cool and neat hearing aids and ear molds. I wish she would show them, but she won't. So, sorry.
Really?
All right. Why does deaf culture matter? Well, deaf culture matters because it represents a strong support mechanism within the hearing society, which is more often not attuned to deaf persons' best interests. Language culture refer to the notation that language and cultures are intertwined and are both needed for deaf children in forming his or her deaf identity. So basically, it matters, just like Black Lives Matter, just like Hispanic Lives Matter, just like Burmese, all lives matter. Like my daughter said, all lives matter. So their culture is dying, and it doesn't need to die. It's a beautiful culture. It's part of hearing culture. A lot of what we've gotten has come from the deaf people. So just like football huddles, the football huddle was started from a deaf person. The baseball sign, that the umpire throws and the pitcher throws out started from a deaf person. So some of the things that we have been started from the deaf culture. So the World Federation for the Deaf has a lot. That's where and this is the link at the bottom. This is where I got a lot of the information. It has a lot of the rights for deaf people and hard of hearing people and sign language worldwide. So it is definitely a place that you should check out and see the different rights and what your rights are, because that's important. You have the right to send your child to any school you want to. You have the right to have access to a sign language interpreter. You have the right to have access to your language. You have the right to have access to your culture. You have the right as a deaf person to have access to hearing aids and different systems that's going to help you. You have that right. Her hearing aids are pink with pink glitter molds. Mine are blue with red ear molds. Both of us wear. That's cool. My daughter's first hearing aids were pink with glitter in them.
Okay.
Now she has her school colors. So her molds are her school colors: orange, white, and red. Orange, orange, black, orange, black, and white. Sorry.
She got the colors wrong.
Orange, black,
And glow.
And glow.
Yeah, it glows in the dark.
Oh, glow, but they look white. And then her aids are white. And then my son has the
White and blue.
His is the American flag colors, red, white, and blue, are the molds, and he has blue aids. So, alrighty. So I wanted to bring this to an attention too. How many deaf schools are there compared to mainstream school? It is going to surprise you. Hi, John Jetter. So there are, and this is in the United States, there are 78 residential schools.
Wait, when did you get that information?
Don't worry about where I got the information. There are 78 residential schools.
When I had it, they said there was more than 78.
No, there are 78 residential schools. According to April 1996 issue, the American Annual of the Deaf, there are 78 residential schools. So I don't know when they meet. So it has not been updated. There could be more, but as far as I know, I haven't found any updating on if there's more deaf schools. My daughter has a link for hers with a microphone. Okay. So it helps to amplify in her ear. Okay. That is cool. Very cool. So compared to 78 in United States, I'm not going to read all of that. So the closest number you'll get would be 1,155 mainstream schools. And they're probably more than that because they're being built all the time. In 2019-2020 school year, there were 3.7 million teachers that will be in classrooms and 3.2 million in the public school and 0.5 million in private schools. And this is a ratio of from teacher to students. So 16 students to one teacher. How can any deaf or hard of hearing child learn and get what they need if there's only one teacher and 16 students? And that's not even right. It's one teacher to 28 students. That's more accurate. So that is more of an accurate overall view of the difference between mainstream. So let me give you my perspective and what we had to deal with the mainstream versus the deaf school. So when my daughter was younger, she went to a school called she went to a preschool, and all they did was hard of hearing and deaf children. And they really pushed oralism. They pushed oralism a lot. They didn't push signing and oralism, talking. They wanted them to speak. And they told me, you know, the deaf school is an institution, and she would come out with a 6th grade education and all this other stuff. Until then we moved, and we still did the mainstream. And my daughter's teacher, she had the FMO system, but the teacher would turn around. She would never let my daughter see her mouth. My daughter always saw the back of her head. The teacher never taught my child. She wanted the interpreter to teach my child, and that's not the interpreter's job, is to teach my child. So when we found out from the interpreter what was going on, we had a heart-to-heart with the school. Then we took a tour. We was invited to take a tour to the school for the deaf. And it was like night and day. You know, they were very welcoming. They were curious about us and who we was. They were curious about my daughter. My daughter was very shy. She had been bullied, would never tell me until the last minute that students were bullying her. The teacher was bullying her. So it did some damage. The mainstream school absolutely did damage to my child. But I should have been more aware of it, and I just wasn't. When we did the deaf school, it was just like night and day. They put her in a class to help build her confidence and her skills in sign language. She took normal, regular classes. She had to be held back because the mainstream school, not the deaf school, but the mainstream school did not teach my child the foundations that she needed. So she had to be held back. But as years went on, she got confident in her signing. She did plays. She was very sassy. Those signs, like I had never seen this bright and lit up child that was so animated. And I mean, I loved it. She found her voice. Then she asked me about staying in the dorm, and I'm like, what? And we let her stay in there one night to get her. They told me the benefits. We can come up to the dorm anytime. The benefits staying in the dorm, and to give her that access, and for her to be submerged in the deaf culture. It was amazing. Claire's friends at school think her aides are cool and realize how much better she can now hear. And that's because she's younger, and that's good. That's cool. We pray that all kids are like that. But as your daughter gets older, that's why you want to get the genetics testing, because you want to know, is it a Connexin 26? Is there a possibility that she can lose all her hearing? Then how is she going to communicate? Are you thinking about getting cochlear implants? You got to make sure that you do all the research before you decide, oh yeah, I'm just going to cut into my child and get cochlear implants. Teach sign language. As you can see, my daughter does a very, very good job. She has her hearing aids in. We're sitting in the same room so she can hear us. There's no background noise. And it's amazing. I mean, it is a beautiful language. Even though sometimes she hates it when I sign, but it is a beautiful language when a parent learns their child's culture, learns their child's language. It's even more precious that you and your child share something that me and my child don't. My daughter has always I wish that my whole family was deaf.
Finally happened.
Your whole family is not deaf. She said it finally happened.
Brothers are.
Her other siblings, not for me. are, but we're talking about here. So yeah, she wishes that I was, that, I was in her world and I'm not. And, I envy that you get to share that bond with your child. It is amazing. Learn sign language. That is an amazing language. Learn your history, learn the culture of it, learn the background of it. It is so amazing. You'll be surprised what you learn. Yes, there's going to be some things that you may not want to hear. There may be some things that are dark because deaf people were treated wrong, and they still to this day are treated wrong. But unless you give it a voice, unless you give sign language a voice, it's going to die. And if you don't do your research, if you don't fight for your culture, your language, it's going to die. And that's what we're trying to prevent, is preventing deaf culture from dying. It is an amazing culture, an amazing culture. So I'm so glad that I put my child in a deaf school. She is in a deaf school. It is always her choice whether to do mainstream or deaf. She knows, she identifies, I think, still as deaf. She still identifies as deaf. At one point, it was hard of hearing. One point, it was hearing. So, she is God's miracle, because God works through her. And I see God working through her all the time. And as many times as she's helped people and she's ministered to people with her being deaf, it's amazing. It is not a handicap. It is not a hindrance. I know several deaf lawyers and doctors that are deaf. So, and a lot of them went to deaf school. So yeah, make sure we put the deaf culture in school in the forefront of everyone's mind. Mainstream school is cool, it's good. We did half and half, where she went half to mainstream school and half to deaf school. Some districts offer that. Take advantage of that. But don't let them lose a part of themselves. It's like her not knowing her Caucasian side or her African American side. What a travesty that would be if she didn't know how important both of her worlds, both of her cultures are. The same way with the deaf culture. Such a travesty that the world is trying to wipe it out. Why? Because they're different, because they speak differently. So if that's the case, why not wipe out every language on the planet other than the English language? And really, that's not even the true language, because God spoke Hebrew. So it's a passion, a very, very, oh, sorry. Yeah, it's getting hard to see us because the lights are not on. I do apologize. But we're going to end it here. Next week, we're actually going to learn some signs. That will be later on. But we're going to teach you some signs right here. Some sign language. My daughter is going to help you. I'm actually going to have her teach it. So we're going to have a PowerPoint, slides, and everything. And next week, we're going to go on and learn some sign language. So we hope that this has been informative for you. If you like to make a donation, again, the donations, we try to help our deaf community, our deaf school. You can Cash App. That is scrolling at the bottom. If you want to reach out, you want me to reach out to you, definitely inbox me. You can inbox me on any of our platforms, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Periscope, or you can just email us at iConnect. .info@gmail.com. We love you guys. Thank you. Will she want to show Claire? She wants to learn if you want a private lesson for sign language, definitely inbox us. But if you like it like this, we can also do it like this. Hold on 1 second, because it's really, really, really hard for you to see. All right, I hope that is better. I apologize, so that you can see your hands. So if you like to learn it like this, you can definitely learn it like this. We're going to do a whole sign language lesson next Wednesday. If you want a personal one-on-one, more intimate, please email me or my beautiful president in the background will definitely reach out to you with more information and getting more information to you. All righty. So we thank you. We appreciate you tuning in. Have a great and amazing day. Be blessed.